The awakening. The sky was a strange shade of gray, neither morning nor night. The air smelled of rust and ash, and the ground beneath was cracked, dry, and lifeless. A lone figure lay sprawled across the barren earth, his clothes torn and stained with dust. His name was Eli. At least, that's what he thought. His head throbbed with pain as he slowly opened his eyes, squinting at the unfamiliar landscape. He tried to remember how he got here, but his mind was a maze of broken images, flashes of light, a faint voice calling his name, and then nothing. "Where am I?" he muttered to himself, his voice hoarse. Eli pushed himself up to a sitting position, scanning the wasteland around him. There was no sign of life. No trees, no water, not even the sound of wind. Just silence. His heart pounded as a sense of unease settled over him. Something was wrong. That's when he saw it. Half buried in the dirt, a few feet away was a strange object, glowing faintly. It was spherical, about the size of a basketball, with intricate patterns etched into its metallic surface. The glow wasn't steady. It pulsed like a heartbeat, faint but steady. Eli's curiosity got the better of him. He crawled over to the object, hesitating for a moment before reaching out. As his fingers brushed the cool metal, a sudden jolt of energy coursed through his body. He gasped and pulled his hand back, but the sphere came to life. Strange symbols began to appear on its surface, glowing brighter with each pulse. Eli couldn't understand them, but they felt familiar, like a memory he couldn't quite grasp. "What are you?" he whispered, more to himself than the object. Before he could think further, he heard a sound, a low mechanical hum. Eli froze, his ears straining to catch it again. The hum grew louder, and the ground beneath him began to tremble. He turned his head slowly, his eyes widening in terror. From the shadows of a nearby ridge, a massive machine emerged. Its body was a mix of metal and decay, with parts that looked ancient but still functional. Its glowing red eyes locked onto Eli, scanning him with an eerie precision. The machine was both terrifying and mesmerizing, a relic of a world Eli didn't recognize but somehow felt connected to. The machine spoke, its voice deep and mechanical, yet strangely calm. "Human anomaly detected. Initiating protocol." Eli's pulse raced. What do you mean?" he stammered, scrambling to his feet. The machine didn't answer. Instead, it extended a long metallic arm toward the sphere. The object floated into the air, drawn to the machine as if by some invisible force. Eli felt a pang of panic. "Wait, what are you doing?" he yelled, but the machine ignored him. The sphere rotated in the air, its glow intensifying until the symbols on its surface were too bright to look at. A beam of light shot out from the sphere, forming a swirling hologram in the air. The image showed a timeline, fragmented and broken, with gaps and distortions. Eli stared at the hologram, his breath caught in his throat. The timeline seemed to stretch endlessly, but it was incomplete, as though parts of history had been erased. The machine turned its glowing eyes back to Eli. "You are the key," it said. Eli took a step back, shaking his head. Key to what? Before the machine could answer, the ground shook violently. A crack split the earth just a few feet away, and from the fissure emerged something even more terrifying. It was another machine, but this one was sleek and predatory, its body designed for speed and destruction. Its glowing blue eyes locked onto Eli, and its movements were fluid and deadly. The first machine shifted, placing itself between Eli and the predator. "Hostile entity detected. Protect the anomaly," it said. The predator lunged, and the two machines clashed in a cacophony of metal and sparks. Eli stumbled back, his heart pounding as he watched the battle unfold. The first machine fought with precision, its movements calculated, while the predator was fast and relentless. Eli didn't wait to see who would win. He turned and ran, his instincts screaming at him to get as far away as possible. But even as he fled, He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being pulled into something far bigger than himself. The last thing he saw before disappearing over the ridge was the sphere, still glowing brightly, hovering in the air like a beacon. The machine's secret. Eli ran, his breath coming in sharp, ragged gasps. The barren landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, offering no cover, no safety. Behind him, the sound of metal tearing and sparks flying echoed through the air. The two machines were locked in a deadly battle, but Eli wasn't sticking around to find out who would win. He crested a small ridge and stumbled to a stop. Below, a narrow canyon wound its way through the wasteland. It wasn't much, but it was better than being out in the open. Eli slid down the slope, rocks tumbling underfoot, and crouched in the shadows of the canyon wall. His chest heaved as he tried to catch his breath. The glowing sphere was still vivid in his mind. Its strange symbols, the beam of light, the fragmented timeline, it all felt important, like a puzzle he was meant to solve. And then there was the machine's voice. "You are the key." Key to what? And why did it call him an anomaly? Eli's thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound, a mechanical whir growing louder. He pressed himself against the canyon wall, his heart pounding. The noise grew closer, then stopped. For a long moment, there was silence. "Human anomaly detected," the voice said again. Eli spun around, his back pressed against the rock. The massive machine, Unit 13, as it would later identify itself, stood at the canyon entrance, its glowing red eyes fixed on him. But this time, it made no move to harm him. Instead, it extended one of its metallic arms, palm open in a gesture that seemed almost peaceful. "Wait," Eli shouted, his voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" "You carry the imprint," the machine said, its voice calm but firm. "You are the last known carrier of the human timeline." Eli blinked, trying to make sense of the words. The human timeline. What does that even mean? Unit 13 stepped closer, its towering frame casting a long shadow over Eli. "This world is broken," it said. "Time itself has fractured. Events that should have shaped history were erased, leaving only remnants of what once was. Humanity has fallen into obscurity. But your DNA, carries the imprint of the original timeline. You are the key to restoring what was lost." Eli shook his head, overwhelmed. "I don't understand. Why me? I'm just nobody." The machine tilted its head, a gesture that seemed almost curious. "You are not nobody. Your presence here was foreseen. The sphere you discovered, the continuum core, is a device capable of rebuilding the timeline. It must be activated, but it will require your imprint to do so." Eli frowned. "Activated? How?" Unit 13 didn't answer immediately. Instead, it turned its gaze toward the sky, where dark clouds churned unnaturally. "The Hollow Ones have awakened. They seek to destroy the core and ensure the timeline remains broken. If they succeed, this fractured reality will become permanent." Eli swallowed hard. He didn't know who or what the Hollow Ones were, but the name alone sent a chill down his spine. "You mean that thing back there?" he asked, gesturing toward the ridge. "That was a scout," Unit 13 said. "A fragment of their force. The true Hollow Ones are far more dangerous." The weight of the situation began to sink in. Eli had no memory of who he was or where he came from, but now he was being told he held the key to saving a broken world. It was too much to process. "I can't do this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't even know who I am." "You will," the machine said. "In time, you will understand your purpose. For now, you must survive." Before Eli could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the canyon. Not footsteps, metallic clanks. The Hollow Ones had found them. Unit 13 shifted, positioning itself between Eli and the sound. "Run," it said simply. "What about you?" Eli asked. The machine didn't answer. Instead, it raised its arm, and a panel slid open, revealing a small compartment. Inside was a glowing shard, pulsing with the same light as the core. "Take this," Unit 13 said, handing Eli the shard. "It is a fragment of the core's power. You will need it to access the Continuum Nexus." Eli hesitated but took the shard, its warmth spreading through his fingers. He tucked it into his pocket and nodded. "I'll find a way," he said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. The clanking grew louder, and Eli knew he didn't have much time. He turned and ran deeper into the canyon, the shard pressing against his leg with every step. Behind him, the sound of battle erupted once more. Unit 13 had engaged the enemy, buying Eli the precious seconds he needed to escape. But as he ran, one thought haunted him. If the timeline was broken, what kind of world would be left if he failed? The Hollow Ones awaken. The canyon walls stretched high above Eli as he ran, the jagged rocks casting long shadows in the dim light. His legs burned, and his breath came in short gasps, but he couldn't stop. Behind him, the distant sounds of battle echoed, metal crashing against metal, sparks flying, and the eerie mechanical roars of something inhuman. Eli glanced back, but there was no sign of Unit 13 or the Predator machines. For now, he was alone. He reached into his pocket and felt the shard Unit 13 had given him. It was warm to the touch, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. What was it really? How could something so small hold the power to save an entire timeline? His thoughts were interrupted by a low rumble. At first, he thought it was thunder, but then the ground beneath him shook violently. A crack split the earth a few feet ahead, and he stumbled, barely managing to keep his footing. From the fissure, a dark, oily mist began to seep, twisting and coiling unnaturally. Eli's chest tightened as a deep, resonating hum filled the air. Then they appeared. At first, they looked like shadows, but as they emerged from the mist, their forms solidified. The Hollow Ones. They were sleek and terrifying, humanoid machines with sharp, angular designs. Their bodies glowed faintly with blue energy, and their heads had no faces, only smooth, reflective surfaces that seemed to watch Eli without eyes. Their movements were fluid and deliberate, like predators sizing up their prey. Eli froze, his mind screaming at him to run, but his legs refused to move. There were 3 of them, and as they stepped closer, the air around them seemed to ripple with an unnatural energy. One of the Hollow Ones raised an arm, and a blade-like appendage extended from its wrist. The sharp metallic hiss broke Eli from his trance. He turned and ran, his heart pounding as the Hollow Ones gave chase. Their footsteps were eerily silent, but Eli could feel them gaining on him. He darted through the canyon, his mind racing for a plan. The shard in his pocket seemed to grow warmer, almost as if it was responding to his fear. Ahead, the canyon split into 2 paths. Without thinking, Eli veered left, the narrow passage forcing him to squeeze between jagged rocks. He hoped the tight space would slow the Hollow Ones, but when he glanced back, they were already adapting. Their bodies shifted, parts folding and compressing, allowing them to slip through with ease. "Great," Eli muttered, his voice trembling. "They can shift too." He pushed himself harder, the shard in his pocket now almost too hot to touch. Just as his lungs felt like they would give out, he spotted an opening in the canyon wall, a small cave. It wasn't much, but it was his only chance. Eli darted inside, pressing his back against the cold stone. He held his breath, his entire body trembling. The Hollow Ones stalked just outside, their heads turning in unison as if scanning for him. The glow of their energy lit up the cave entrance, casting long, eerie shadows inside. Eli reached into his pocket and pulled out the shard. It pulsed brighter now, its light illuminating the cave. The Hollow Ones reacted immediately, their heads snapping toward the glow. "No, no, no," Eli whispered. One of the Hollow Ones stepped into the cave, its blade arm scraping against the rock. Eli backed away, clutching the shard tightly. He didn't know what it was or how to use it, but if it had any kind of power, now was the time to find out. As the Hollow One advanced, the shard grew brighter, its heat spreading through Eli's hand and up his arm. The symbols on its surface began to shift, just like the ones on the sphere. "Come on," Eli muttered, his voice shaking. "Do something." The Hollow One lunged, its blade aimed straight for Eli's chest. Instinctively, Eli raised the shard, and a burst of light erupted from it, blinding and searing. The Hollow One let out a distorted screech as the light struck it, forcing it back. The other two Hollow Ones immediately reacted, rushing toward the cave. Eli stumbled backward, the shard still glowing in his hand. He didn't know what he had just done, but it had bought him a few precious seconds. As the Hollow Ones approached, the shard seemed to pull at him, tugging him deeper into the cave. He followed the pull, his steps uncertain but desperate. The cave twisted and turned, the light from the shard revealing strange carvings on the walls, symbols, and images similar to the ones on the core. Finally, he reached a chamber. At its center was a pedestal, and on it rested a small metallic device. It looked ancient, its surface etched with the same glowing patterns as the shard. The Hollow Ones were close now, their distorted voices echoing through the cave. Eli knew he didn't have much time. He placed the shard on the pedestal, and the entire chamber came to life. Symbols lit up across the walls, and a low hum filled the air. The device on the pedestal began to spin, projecting a hologram into the air. It was the timeline again, broken and fragmented, just as before. But this time, the hologram included something new, a faint, glowing path leading through the fractures. Eli stared at it, realizing what it meant. The shard had unlocked a clue, a way to fix the timeline. But before he could do anything, the Hollow Ones reached the chamber. The Nexus awakens. The Hollow Ones advanced into the chamber, their smooth, reflective faces glowing faintly with blue light. Their movements were deliberate, unhurried, as if they knew there was no escape. Eli backed up until his heels hit the pedestal. His eyes darted between the shimmering hologram of the fractured timeline and the menacing figures closing in on him. "Stay back," he shouted, his voice echoing in the chamber. He didn't expect them to listen, and they didn't. One of the Hollow Ones raised its blade arm, its movements precise and mechanical. The edge gleamed in the faint light as it prepared to strike. Eli's fingers tightened around the device on the pedestal, the shard still glowing in his hand. Then something unexpected happened. The symbols on the chamber walls began to shift and glow brighter. A deep hum filled the air, vibrating through Eli's chest. The Hollow Ones hesitated, their heads tilting as if they were analyzing the sudden change. Before Eli could react, the pedestal emitted a beam of light that shot upward, striking the ceiling. The entire chamber shook as the beams spread out, forming a swirling portal above him. The hologram of the timeline expanded, and lines of energy snaked through the air, connecting the fractured pieces. The Hollow Ones froze, their reflective faces turning toward the portal. For the first time, they seemed uncertain. Eli didn't understand what was happening, but he wasn't about to waste the opportunity. The shard in his hand pulsed, and an instinctive urge washed over him. He placed the shard into a slot on the device, and the portal's glow intensified. "Authorization accepted," a calm, mechanical voice said, emanating from the chamber walls. Nexus activation sequence initiated. The Hollow Ones snapped out of their hesitation and charge. Eli barely had time to duck as the closest one swung its blade, the sharp edge slicing through the air where his head had been moments before. He scrambled to the other side of the pedestal, his heart racing. "What do I do? What do I do?" he muttered, his eyes darting to the swirling portal above. The voice spoke again, seemingly in response. "Timeline stabilization requires user input. Identify primary sequence for restoration." Eli had no idea what that meant. Primary sequence? What does that even mean? He shouted. The Hollow Ones were relentless, their movements swift and coordinated. One of them lunged at Eli, and he grabbed the pedestal for support, barely avoiding the attack. The hologram flickered as his hand brushed against it, and suddenly an image appeared. It was a memory, not his, but someone else's. A city bustling with life, humans walking through crowded streets under a bright blue sky. Laughter, conversation, the sounds of a world that no longer existed. Eli stared at it, his breath catching. Is this what the world used to be? The voice spoke again. Primary sequence identified. Humanity Restoration Protocol. Do you confirm? The Hollow Ones were closing in. Eli didn't have time to think. Yes, he shouted. I confirm. The portal erupted in light, and a shockwave burst from the pedestal, knocking the Hollow Ones off their feet. Eli shielded his eyes as the light enveloped the chamber, the fractured timeline beginning to mend itself in the hologram. But then the voice spoke again, and its tone was different. Warning, almost urgent. Warning. Core energy insufficient for full stabilization. Additional fragments required. The light dimmed, and the portal began to shrink. The Hollow Ones, though momentarily stunned, started to rise again. Eli's heart sank. No, no, no. What do you mean insufficient? The voice didn't answer, but the shard in Eli's hand glowed faintly, almost as if it was pointing him toward something. Find the remaining fragments, the voice finally said. Only then can the timeline be fully restored. Eli didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed the shard, now dim and cool, and darted toward an opening on the far side of the chamber. The Hollow Ones gave chase, their movements more aggressive than before. The narrow tunnel led Eli deeper into the ground, the faint glow of the shard his only light. The echoes of the Hollow Ones' pursuit grew louder, their distorted voices bouncing off the walls. Eli's mind raced. The activation of the Nexus had shown him a glimpse of what was possible, a world restored, humanity alive again. But now he knew it wouldn't be that simple. The timeline was still fractured, and he needed to find the remaining fragments to fix it completely. But how many fragments were there? And where would he even begin to look? Fragments of the past. Eli's lungs burned as he sprinted through the twisting tunnels. The air was damp and heavy, the walls closing in around him. The shard pulsed faintly in his hand, its glow the only light guiding him. Behind him, the metallic echoes of the Hollow One's pursuit grew louder, their relentless footsteps a reminder that he couldn't stop. The shard tugged at him like an invisible compass, urging him forward. Where are you taking me? Eli muttered, though he didn't expect an answer. The tunnel widened suddenly, opening into a vast underground chamber. Stalactites hung from the ceiling, and the ground was uneven, littered with debris that looked both natural and mechanical. In the center of the chamber stood a massive, ancient structure, a towering obelisk covered in the same glowing symbols Eli had seen in the Nexus. The shard in his hand grew warmer, brighter, as if in recognition. Eli approached the obelisk cautiously, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The symbols on its surface shifted and pulsed, reacting to his presence. He hesitated, then reached out and placed the shard against the structure. A low hum filled the chamber, and the obelisk came to life. Light spread from the shard, illuminating carvings that had been hidden in shadow. Images of a lost world appeared, humans thriving in cities, machines working alongside them. And then, destruction. The timeline fractured, splintering into chaos. Eli stared, entranced. The images shifted again, revealing something new. Fragments of light scattered across a map. He recognized some of the landmarks, ruins he had seen during his aimless wandering through the wasteland. These are the fragments, Eli realized. The obelisk was showing him where to find the pieces of the Nexus. But before he could study the map further, a chilling sound echoed through the chamber. The Hollow Ones had found him. Eli turned just in time to see them emerge from the tunnel, their reflective faces glowing faintly. There were more of them now, 6, maybe 7, all moving with the same fluid, predatory grace. Not again, Eli muttered, backing away from the obelisk. He glanced around the chamber, searching for an escape, but the hollow ones were already spreading out, cutting off his routes. The obelisk pulsed, drawing his attention. A new symbol had appeared, a handprint, glowing faintly. Eli didn't hesitate. He placed his hand against the symbol, and a surge of energy shot through him. The obelisk's light intensified, and a shield of glowing energy erupted around it, separating Eli from the advancing machines. The hollow ones hesitated, their reflective faces tilting as they analyzed the barrier. One of them stepped forward and extended its blade arm, testing the energy field. Sparks flew as the blade made contact, but the shield held firm. Eli let out a shaky breath, his heart pounding. "Okay, I'll take it. What now?" The obelisk responded. A section of the floor slid open, revealing the hidden passage. The shield began to flicker. The hollow ones were pressing against it now, their movements more aggressive. Eli didn't wait to see how long the barrier would hold. He sprinted for the passage, diving into the darkness just as the shield collapsed. The hollow ones let out a distorted roar, their footsteps echoing behind him as they gave chase. The hidden passage twisted and turned, and Eli struggled to keep up with the shard's faint glow. His mind raced with questions. Why had the obelisk helped him? Who built it? And why did he feel like he was being tested every step of the way? Finally, the passage opened into another chamber. This one was smaller, but its walls were lined with strange, glowing consoles. At the center was another fragment, larger than the shard in his hand, but pulsing with the same light. Eli didn't have time to marvel. He grabbed the fragment, and the chamber lit up. The consoles hummed to life, and a voice, calm and ancient, spoke. Fragment 2 of 7 acquired, synchronizing with Continuum Core. The shard in Eli's hand pulsed in response, and a wave of energy rippled through the chamber. The voice continued. Warning, hollow ones adapting. Defensive measures required. Eli's stomach dropped. Adapting? What does that mean? The answer came almost immediately. The hollow ones burst into the chamber, but something was different. Their bodies were shifting, their forms becoming sharper, more angular. Their reflective faces now displayed faint lines of light, as if they were evolving. Eli clutched the new fragment tightly. Defensive measures. Right. Where are they? As if in answer, one of the consoles lit up, displaying a sequence of glowing symbols. Eli didn't understand their meaning, but his instincts told him what to do. He pressed his hand against the console, and the chamber rumbled. A section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow escape tunnel. At the same time, the chamber's lights flared, and beams of energy shot out from the walls, targeting the hollow ones. The machines dodged and weaved, their movements almost too fast to follow. But the beams slowed them down just enough for Eli to make his escape. He darted into the tunnel, clutching the fragment and shard like his life depended on it. Because it did. The evolving enemy. The tunnel seemed endless, its walls narrowing with each step Eli took. The faint light of the shard illuminated only a few feet ahead, casting jagged shadows that danced like ghosts. His heart pounded in his chest, and every breath felt heavier. The weight of the new fragment in his hand reminding him of how much was at stake. Behind him, the sound of pursuit was relentless. The hollow ones were no longer just chasing. They were adapting, evolving. Their distorted voices echoed through the tunnel, mechanical yet unnervingly alive. Eli stumbled as the tunnel abruptly opened into a wide chamber. Unlike the others, this one felt different. The walls were smooth and metallic, glowing faintly with a pale, otherworldly light. At the center of the room was a pedestal, and on it rested another device, larger than the fragment but humming with the same energy. The shard pulsed in Eli's hand, growing almost unbearably hot. It wasn't just guiding him, it was urging him to act. What now? Eli muttered, glancing back at the dark tunnel he had just come from. The sounds of the hollow ones were closer now, their movements faster, more deliberate. He approached the pedestal, placing the shard and the newly acquired fragment on its surface. The chamber responded instantly, a deep hum vibrating through the floor. Lines of energy shot out from the pedestal, racing across the walls and ceiling like a web of light. A voice, calm and mechanical, echoed through the chamber. Fragment 2 synchronized. Initiating defense protocol. Eli barely had time to process the words before panels on the walls slid open, revealing rows of ancient turrets. They hummed to life, swiveling toward the tunnel entrance just as the first of the hollow ones appeared. The machines were faster now, their movements sharper and more coordinated. The first turret fired, a beam of light slicing through the air. The hollow one dodged with inhuman precision, but the second turret struck true, sending it sprawling. For a moment, Eli allowed himself a breath of relief. The defenses were working, but then he saw it. The downed hollow one didn't stay down. Its body twisted and shifted, broken parts reassembling themselves into a more streamlined form. It rose again, faster and deadlier than before. "They're learning," Eli realized, his voice barely above a whisper. The turrets continued to fire, but the hollow ones were adapting, dodging, and weaving through the beams with terrifying agility. Eli knew it was only a matter of time before they overwhelmed the defenses. The voice from the pedestal spoke again. Synchronization incomplete. Additional fragments required for full activation. Eli clenched his fists, frustration bubbling inside him. "Great. More fragments. Where am I supposed to find them?" The pedestal responded, projecting a hologram into the air. It was another map, similar to the one he had seen at the obelisk, but more detailed. Markers appeared, pinpointing the locations of the remaining fragments. Eli stared at the map, memorizing the locations as best he could. One was deep within a mountainous region he vaguely recognized from his travels. Another was marked near a massive, decaying structure, a ruined city, perhaps. The last one was far away, in a region shrouded in darkness, its details obscured. The sound of shattering metal snapped him back to reality. One of the hollow ones had destroyed a turret, its reflective face turning toward Eli with a chilling focus. "No time to think," Eli muttered, grabbing the shard and fragment from the pedestal. The voice spoke one last time as he turned to run. "Warning. Enemy adaptation accelerating. Proceed with caution." Eli sprinted toward the far side of the chamber, where another tunnel awaited. The hollow ones were relentless, their distorted voices echoing behind him. He could feel their presence growing closer, the air itself heavy with their unnatural energy. As he entered the tunnel, the shard pulsed again, guiding him toward his next destination. But something about its glow felt different. The light was no longer steady. It flickered, almost as if it was struggling. "What's wrong with you?" Eli whispered, clutching the shard tightly. He didn't expect an answer, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the shard was somehow connected to the Nexus, and that its power was waning. The tunnel twisted and turned, and Eli's legs ached from running. He could hear the hollow ones gaining on him, their pursuit unrelenting. His mind raced with questions. How had they evolved so quickly? Was it the Nexus activation that had triggered their change? Or was there something deeper at play? Finally, the tunnel opened into the cool night air. Eli stumbled out onto a rocky ledge overlooking a vast canyon. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. The shard pulsed again, pointing toward the mountains in the distance. That was where the next fragment waited. But before Eli could catch his breath, the hollow ones emerged from the tunnel. There were more of them now, their sleek forms gleaming under the moonlight. Their movements were faster, more aggressive, and their reflective faces glowed faintly with new, intricate patterns. Eli backed away, his heart pounding. The shard in his hand flickered weakly, its light barely visible. "No, no, no," he muttered, clutching it tightly. "Don't fail me now." The hollow ones advanced, their distorted voices rising into a mechanical cacophony. Eli looked toward the mountains, then back at the advancing machines. He had no weapons, no defenses, only the shard and the fragments he had collected. As the first hollow one lunged at him, Eli made a decision. He turned and jumped, diving off the ledge into the canyon below. The final convergence. The world blurred around Eli as he plummeted through the air. The wind roared in his ears, and the shard in his hand pulsed weakly, casting a faint glow that seemed to grow dimmer with each passing second. His stomach churned, the ground rushing toward him. There was no time to think, no time to plan. The canyon walls seemed to rise up to meet him, the darkness swallowing him whole as he fell. Then, just as it felt like the end was inevitable, a sharp, jagged rock jutted out from the cliffside, catching Eli's hand. His body jerked violently as he gripped the stone with all his strength, his fingers slipping for a moment before finding purchase. "Not today," Eli whispered, gasping for breath. He pulled himself up, muscles screaming in protest, and crawled onto a narrow ledge that extended out from the cliff. Below him, the canyon seemed endless, a dark abyss that would surely swallow him whole. But he had no time to waste. The hollow ones were still after him, their eerie presence ever closer. The shard pulsed again in his hand, the faint light growing steadier as it guided him toward something. He turned his head toward the mountains in the distance. They were no longer a distant goal. They were a destination, and the final fragment was waiting for him. He had to keep moving. Eli stumbled to his feet, his body heavy and exhausted. His mind raced, the weight of the task pressing down on him. The hollow ones were relentless, their pursuit a constant, suffocating pressure. But as much as they were adapting, so was he. The nexus, the timeline. It wasn't just something he was trying to fix. It was his world, his future, and he was the only one who could change it. He glanced at the shard once more, feeling its energy pulse in time with his heartbeat. The shard was more than just a tool. It was part of him now, a fragment of something ancient, something bigger, and he could feel the weight of its power growing stronger. But so were the hollow ones. Eli's eyes narrowed. He had no choice but to face them head-on. There was no more running, no more hiding. The final fragment was within reach, but it wouldn't matter if the hollow ones were the ones to find it first. The mountains loomed closer as he climbed higher, using the jagged rocks as footholds. The path grew steeper, more treacherous, but his determination kept him moving. With each step, the shard pulsed, guiding him toward the final convergence. Then, just as the summit came into view, a low hum filled the air. Eli froze. His eyes scanned the sky, but it was empty. No drones, no ships, no sign of the hollow ones. But the hum wasn't from the machines. It was coming from deep within the earth. The ground shook beneath him, and Eli stumbled, barely managing to keep his balance. The air crackled with energy, and he looked around, his heart racing. It was happening. The final convergence had begun. The ground before him split open, and from the rift, a burst of light erupted. A beam of energy shot up toward the sky, crackling with the same power that had guided him this far. The shard in his hand pulsed with a newfound intensity, and the fragment he had collected responded in kind, glowing brighter. The nexus was awakening. Eli's breath caught in his throat as the beam of light intensified. The hollow ones appeared at the edge of the rift, their forms glowing with the same dark energy. Their leader stepped forward, its blade arm raised. "It's over, human," it said, its voice distorted and cold. "The timeline is ours. You cannot stop us." Eli's grip tightened on the shard, his voice steady despite the danger. "I don't need to stop you. I just need to finish what I started." The light from the rift flared, and in that moment, everything changed. The fragment in Eli's hand, along with the shard, merged into one, a blinding flash of energy that sent a shockwave through the air. The hollow ones screamed in unison, their bodies convulsing as the light engulfed them. For a moment, Eli thought he had failed. But as the light receded, he saw it. The hollow ones had disintegrated, their forms vanishing into nothingness. The rift pulsed once more, stabilizing, its glow fading into a calm, steady hum. The timeline had been restored. The air was still, peaceful even. The mountains, the canyon, the world. Everything felt as though it had been reset, renewed. The damage had been undone. Eli stood at the edge of the rift, his heart still racing. He looked down at the shard, now dim, its energy spent. The timeline had been mended, but at what cost? The world was changing again. The echoes of the past were quiet. But they weren't gone. They never were. As Eli looked up at the stars, a faint smile touched his lips. The fight was over, but his journey had only just begun.